All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to shorten this thing up. What I'm going to do is give a brief for the existence of a lawsuit, which I'd like to pursue. I'm looking for attorney representation um, for this. Uh, I was homeless in the city of Fort Collins during a period of time that ranges from 2000 August of 2007 to October of 2020. During such time, I got several camping tickets. Uh, the city has a law, Fort Collins City Ordinance, excuse me, 17 181, which is unconstitutional. It violates all sorts of rights, protected civil rights that I have, that every homeless person has. In addition, I've been subjected to another law, Fort Collins City Ordinance 17182A, since, which I argue is also unconstitutional. Um, the main part of this lawsuit is, however, for the period of time, the 3 years in which I was homeless. Um, Background for this period of time is I was living in a car. I also lived in several shelters on and off. The car was inoperable for the final 2 years. The car was parked on a road. It was legally parked. I would move it by hand whenever I get a police notice. So I never violated any traffic infractions during that period of time because I was able to move the vehicle. All right. What is the law? The law is Fort Collins City Ordinance 17181, which makes it illegal to camp or to permit anyone to camp. It also makes it illegal to pitch a tent, but pitching a tent is camping, according to the definition within Fort Collins City Ordinance 17181. The definition of camping in Fort Collins City Ordinance 17181, broadly speaking, only uh, targets rights. Uh, the set of activities that it prohibits are activities that are guaranteed by our civil rights. And here's the law verbatim in terms of the definition. Camping shall mean to sleep, to spend the night, to reside or dwell temporarily with or without bedding or other camping gear, and with or without shelter, or to perform activities of daily living, such as eating or sleeping at such place. Camping shall not include incidental napping or sleeping. Okay, part one. I'm going to establish standing here. So, in order to establish standing, I must establish that I have suffered irreparable harm. So, uh, irreparable harm. Which case would I like to use? I'd like to use kind of multitasking. I'm not very good at that. So I'm actually going to quote the case instead of just, but it's okay. This is going to be an actual brief. Um, so I'm going to quote the case Catholic versus New York, echoing Elrod Burns, and here we go. Site is it says 592 U.S. 2020 curarium. Sorry, I just woke up. I need coffee. Supreme Court of the United States, number 2887. 817. And the case is this: the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, New York, versus Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, on application for injunctive relief. November 25th, 2020. And on page 5, we have the following: irreparable harm. There can be no question that the challenge restrictions, if enforced, will cause irreparable harm. Now we're at Elrod Burns, quote unquote. Uh, quote: the loss of First Amendment freedoms uh, for even minimal periods of time unquestionably constitutes irreparable injury. Unquote. Elrod v. Burns, 472 U.S. 347, 373, 1976, plurality opinion. Okay, uh, so this is the condition that I would like to prove happens in the city of Fort Collins for people who are homeless, which is the loss of First Amendment rights for minimal periods of time. So the law, the definition of camping is that camping shall uh, uh, mean to sleep and to spend the night. So let's look at what it means to spend the night. Well, there's only 2 places in Fort Collins, and there are 2 laws which govern behavior on these places, and that's public property and private property. Um, these are mutually exclusive and jointly inclusive regions of the city. Um, I tried to disprove this by going into the zoning laws. But public property, there are 26 zones. Public and private property are not defined. So there's no way to actually disprove this assertion. I think it's called common parlance terminology, public property and private property. That's not one, it's the other for a city. I'm not entirely certain how to go about even proving that assertion that it's common parlance. One would probably have to take a survey of a large number of cities. I haven't done that in this particular context. I have surveyed a bunch of cities in other contexts, mainly looking at their camping laws. And by the way, the particular survey that I'll mention here is that I've looked. Fort Collins is the 4th largest city of Colorado. I have looked at the 4th largest cities of all 50 states, and I've looked at their camping laws, and there's nothing even remotely similar to the camping law of Fort Collins in any of these states in terms of blatantly, facially violating civil rights. Okay, so in order to show irreparable harm, what I have to all that this Elrod v. Burns establishes is that all I have to do is show minimal violations of my First Amendment rights. Well, the second clause, to spend the night, makes it such that I can't spend the night on public property. There's another law, Fort Collins City Ordinance 1740, which is trespassing, as well as other provisions of the right to privacy, quiet enjoyment, etc., that are well-established property rights, which indicate that the right to be on a piece of private property is the property owners. And since homeless people, generally speaking, do not own property in the city that they own, like in Fort Collins, it is the case that they don't have the right to be on private property, such as the right to guest or to host of the private property owners. So people have to be either on public property or private property or outside of the city. So people who can't be on private property because of trespassing, therefore must be on public property. There's not enough homeless shelter to house all of the homeless people in Fort Collins. This is well established. Adam Weinmold, the case ACLU, Adam Weinmold versus the city of Fort Collins, establishes this by using the HUD PID count, point in contact count. And there's a factor of two, roughly speaking, indicated by that case. But in meaning there's twice as many homeless people as shelter space for homeless people provided by the city. In reality, this factor is much more likely 7. And the reason that I say this is the HUD PID count was studied during the years 1982 and 1983. Oh, wait, this is going to be a brief. Okay. The HUD PID count undercount was once studied and found to undercount by a factor of 10. And generally speaking, their technology is improved every year. The HUD PID count technology. So right now, I would say it undercounts by a factor of 3 or 4. This estimate can be triangulated throughout by asking various homeless social experts in the city. One who wrote a master's degree on this thesis, the very topic of the homeless in Fort Collins. So, at any rate, so we can't. Getting back to the point, we have to be on either public or private property. We can't be on private property because of trespassing. We can't be on public property during any 24-hour period because of to spend the night. Because if we were on public property for a 24-hour period, that could only mean that we have spent the night during a 24-hour period, which means that we have camped. And it's illegal to camp. So the second clause egregiously violates, and trivially violates all First Amendment rights, which establishes irreparable harm. What damages could be asked for? Well, I would say that the cost of just meeting the second clause alone is not inconsiderate for somebody who has no vehicle. Even if you have a vehicle, you have to pay the gas to leave town and to come back each night. Over a period of, I was homeless for 3 years, but my car was only inoperable for 2 years. So I'm going to look at a 2-year range, which is roughly 700 days. It costs $2 to ride the bus, to leave the city, and to come back each day when such as possible during the daytime or at night rather, which is during the winter months and the early spring months and the fall months. During the summer, it's not possible to leave the night by the bus. If night is defined to be after sunset, because the buses stop running well before after sunset. And so it's simply impossible to leave the city. So it costs more. So it would take a cab fare, for example, to leave the city, to get out of the city and back at night, each night for 700 nights. If we just use the value $2 for a bus when it was possible, that'd be $1,400 multiplied by a factor of 7. That's $10,000. I'm not going to sue for $10,000. I'm going to sue for more, like, I think 60 to 80 is the right range, because of cruel and unusual punishment. And the reason that cruel and unusual punishment has happened is because of case law, basically, that begins with Robinson v. California, 1962, in which case the California state law made it illegal to be addicted to the use of narcotics. One might note that if one must leave the city each night, one therefore does not have the ability or the right to be addicted to the use of narcotics in the city for at least a small fraction of the period each night. And therefore, this law is equivalent to making it illegal to be addicted to the use of narcotics for some minimal period of time each night. However, that's not very relevant as it is for the First Amendment, Elrod v. Burns, because Supreme Court precedent is very clear here that even First Amendment right violations for the most minimal brief periods of time establishes irreparable harm. But the case Robinson v. California wasn't analyzed in terms of brief periods of time violations. So all we can say is that this really short argument gets us a little ways. But there's a Martin Boise argument, and there's alternative arguments which I believe are much more convincing than Martin Boise that I have established. The main case for that is Ingram v. Wright, 1977. And the Supreme Court, in this case, establishes the outlines, the envelope of things which govern cruel and unusual punishment according to the Eighth Amendment. We're talking about federal cruel and unusual punishment here. There's also state cruel and unusual punishment. And the state constitution guarantees people protections against the government imposing cruel and unusual punishments upon them. State case law began diverging from federal law about 150 years ago. And state case law, it's roughly 150 years ago now. State case law establishes a slightly different meaning for what cruel and unusual punishment is, the state type of cruel and unusual punishment, than what the federal case law has established, which is interesting. And I better not talk about that because it's supposed to be a brief. All right, so within Ingram v. Wright, the Supreme Court said cruel and unusual punishment. I just woke up. Cruel and unusual punishment imposes substantive limits on what can be made criminal and punished as such, unquote. So this is the Robinson kind of cruel and unusual punishment. It imposes limits on lawmaking here, right? What can be made criminal and punished as such. So that's lawmaking, which is why Robinson v. California eliminated a section of the law, that section of the California state law, which made it illegal to be addicted to the use of narcotics. Now, the legal practice of differentiating case law from as applied versus on face became something prevalent after Robinson v. California. This happened in the early 1970s, this movement of categorization. And every case, of course, is as applied. But I'd like to make a facial challenge to this. And elsewhere, I have arguments for why that we should obviously win, even with Salerno. And due process is trivially easy to win because the first clause, to sleep, comes under bodily integrity. Many others come under bodily integrity, like activities of daily living, which is a federally protected right. It's an OSHA right. that people who live in long-term health care facilities have protections against, their people helping them out, getting the employers violating their rights to perform activities of daily living against. So, and that's a sufficient condition for a different kind of lawsuit. It's 18 U.S. 241 and 242, which is deprivation of rights under color of law and conspiracy to deprive rights. And I'm not saying that this ought to be pursued, this avenue. I'm just saying that I have written a lawsuit here where I've done some analysis and found case law and found the necessary and sufficient conditions for such a lawsuit and sent it to the city. When they ticketed me, I threatened the city that I would sue them if they wouldn't change the law. And this is kind of hush-hush because I decided to rescind this offer of suing the city with an 18 U.S. 241 and 242 and just go ahead and bash their heads in with my motion to dismiss. I represented myself in two of the tickets, and one of the first ticket, I had representation by a local attorney, court-appointed attorney under my indigency status. It was free to me, and I lost that case. Everybody loses here if they don't get outside representation or represent themselves. It's like a done deal. You will lose, and you will pay $100. The fee is even set, unless you're a repeat offender, which almost every homeless person is here, in which case you might do jail time. There's a guy who was caught in January a few years ago, and he did 10 days in jail in the summer. There's always like a 6-month delay. Anyway, so as for me, because the city and the police knew that I felt that this law is unconstitutional and that I could capably defend myself against it to the point of getting judicial review by exiting municipal court around here, as by appealing a case, they just refused to win or to try to win. I made it easy for them to win because in my motion to dismiss, whenever I got a ticket, I confessed. I always confessed to having spent much longer periods of time camping than just the ticket of the day indicated. But the city refused to prosecute. Is that prosecutorial misconduct perhaps there? At any rate, they would always no prosecute. So they no prosecute. And I just had no penalties. I was immune from camping tickets, essentially. All that did is make it so that I never got a camping ticket. Or if I got a camping ticket, I never got penalized or had to pay any fines or had to do any jail time for it. So I think that's a cheap trick because I wanted to lose those cases in appeal because I wanted to rid myself of the burden of being under this cruel and unusual punishment and having my First Amendment rights be violated as a homeless person. Now, I'm not homeless. I haven't been homeless in a year and a half. My First Amendment rights aren't violated as a homeless person because I'm able to, to spend the night means it's illegal for me now to spend the night in my house. I can still spend the night within the city, and so the city isn't violating my First Amendment rights. I can participate in exercising these rights outside of my home by leaving my home. Now, why is it that I have to leave my home? Well, this is just using a facial interpretation, a textualist facial interpretation of 17182A, which is the law that prohibits camping within my own home that I'm under now. And 17182 prohibits camping as defined by 17181, with the exception of minimal periods of time like 2 weeks per year, unless I get permission from the city, in which case I can get an extra week. And then there's one final extra week, totaling for a whole month, in which I can camp within my own home, according to 17182A. So 17182A is a very poorly written law that doesn't deal with curtilage. It has no home interior exclusionary clause. It just simply makes it illegal to camp on, uh, excuse me, private residential property. That includes churches, by the way. Um, so there's a church in a private residential area here in Fort Collins, and people who camp on the outside of this church on the lawn, it's they get camping tickets all of the time, and that's the Mennonite church near the library. Um, so okay, I think I've established irreparable harm, and establishing cruel and unusual punishment has already been done for one person in the city of Fort Collins, and that person is Adam Weinwald. You can look up the case. It's the ACLU was representing Adam Weinwald, and it was ruled that Adam suffered cruel and unusual punishment. But that's only one as-applied case. The ruling was not on face. So I want injunctive and declarative relief. I want this law declared unconstitutional on face. And I want it removed so that no homeless person ever in the future gets a camping ticket from 17182 as made in the year 2006. And I'm looking for attorney representation to do this. And of course, I will take a back seat and I'll just give you my arguments, and you can choose among them what you like, or add, or subtract. Thank you. Have a good day.